happiness, excitement,
Sex.
stuff
Let's
like
talk
that.
about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
I had a feeling you were gonna do that.
I'm
That's why
always gonna do that.
I was very careful with the word. I knew
Be
you
salt
were
and
gonna
pepper,
do it.
salt and pepper every day of the week, man.
Feeling good. And now the Uncut Podcast presented by Joe and Theo.
Everybody to the Uncut Podcast. So my name is Theo, and I'm joined here with my co-host Joe. Joe, would you like to say hi to the audience?
Hey guys, Joe here.
Right. So in today's episode, I think this is a topic that we both wanted to kind of cover as a first episode starting off. We'll be essentially diving into social media and whether or not it's good for us, or if it's bad for us, or if it should be moderated or not. And kind of the reason why we decided to go about this is social media is an integral part of our everyday lives, right? Or since the time it actually came into fruition and it got created, its use has skyrocketed ever since. And whether it is finding new places to visit, or finding new places to dine, or start communicating with your friends more easily, it's inevitable that this thing is going to become even more integral with years to come in everyday human life. So it really kind of brings up the question for us, especially for both me and Joe, is this good or is this bad?
Yeah, no,
And that's kind of why we wanted to kind of tackle this.
yeah, no. You bring up a good point. So, like you're saying, like social media can be used for seeing what places to dine, how your friends are doing, all this type of stuff. So, Theo, let me ask you the question: like, what do you use social media for the most? Like, how do you
Not,
use it in your everyday lifestyle?
I don't. No, I'm
Fantastic.
kidding.
It's just
And the podcast ends there.
just
Done.
good episode. We'll see you guys next week. No, but
No, but in all honesty, I mean, for me, primarily, the way I would use social media is twofold. Mainly to communicate with friends, and secondly, to maybe look at places where I might be interested to go to with my friends. So, for example, if there's a new restaurant we want to visit, definitely I'll go to social media. I'll go on Facebook. I'll go on Instagram. I'll see some photos. I'll maybe go on Yelp and see what people are saying. I know Yelp isn't, it's kind of skimming the stretch of social media, but that's mainly how I would tend to use it. I know you on your end, you're a lot more active on platforms. So how do you tend to use it?
yeah, well, I mean, Yelp is maybe the one I use the least there. It's kind of like a Trivago, in my opinion, more of a informational site than a social media site. But I understand where you're coming from. But no, for myself, I'm more of an avid user on there than I think you are. That's for sure. I'm someone who uses it more in a way to keep contact with people. So, you know, especially in today's day and age, if you're like me and you're an introvert and all you want to do is stay home most of your time, social media is a good way just to keep in communication with people that maybe moved away. Like I know me and you come from a larger city, so most of our people we grew up with still live here, but you know at the same time, it's
Yeah.
probably also close friends that moved away, moved out of the city, the country, that you still want to keep in communication with. Whether it's just saying hi every once in a while or just talking, seeing how they're doing, seeing how their lives are going about. Like I've dialed it back a lot in recent years. Like before, it used to be the Snapchat, the Facebook, all that type of stuff. Now I think it's mostly like just Instagram, and even that, maybe it's like once a day I'm on there. Like
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've grown a lot older since since 10 years ago, so I think but I would say that I think mostly just trying to keep in contact with some people, close friends, people that were close, maybe in high school, maybe in college, and just a way to keep in
Right.
communication with people, really.
Yeah, and look, I think that's one of the biggest benefits the social media has brought to the table, especially to society, is really, in my view, right? And feel free to chime in at any time with your view as well. But from what I've seen, what I've experienced really with social media, it's been the connection that you feel. So you're able to communicate a lot easier with people that possibly live in other corners of the globe. Let's say if you have family, I both of us, although we're born in a big city, we're born in Montreal. we're both have heritage stemming from Europe. We have family members in Europe. I have family members in Greece, and so on and so forth. So we find that it's way easier to stay in contact with them through social media. Social media for sure for communication reasons has decreased costs of communication. I don't want to get too technical and businessy on this, but definitely, calling my godfather in Greece is way cheaper to do through Messenger than to do through a landline where I'm paying an arm and a leg to tell him hi.
Yeah, exactly. Calling the great Nana in Italy is a lot easier nowadays. I think through FaceTime than it is through a landline, especially with gotta do that dial
Exactly.
up, gotta wait. I'm pretty sure most people probably listen to this never have done international calling. It sucks.
Oh, it's horrible.
Gotta wait on that phone. Gotta hope you reach out. But not only that, it's even when you travel nowadays too, right? Like most people don't even consider like I remember this past summer when I was in Portugal, right? We we never even like the last thing we wanted was to not have data,
Yeah.
because we wanted to stay in communication with our friends. Who at that time you were in Greece, right? We have another
Yeah.
friend who was in Italy, and we were all we had friends also in Montreal, in Canada at that time. But it's like you said, right? You want to stay in communication. You want to talk to them, even though you're miles apart. You're across an ocean. And granted, for me and you, we were maybe not that much further apart. But still, it was a way to keep in contact. I remember like taking the train, right? And we had
Yeah.
our group chat with the boys, and it was just constantly me, you, and our other friend
Yeah.
going back and forth. And
And
all three of us
eventually
in
you
different time zones
decided
too.
to, yeah, eventually we annoyed you so much that you decided to mute the chat. So that's another
Well, when you're on a
another
train
thing
and your
to,
phone's going off and and you want to go to sleep, because you're traveling from Lisbon to Porto, yeah, I would mute you guys too, just as much as anything. But other than that communicational aspect, there's other benefits that come along with it.
definitely.
If you're somebody who's starting up a small business, right? Social media can be such a great impact for you nowadays with the way that advertising works on social media. That your
Yep.
posts can be seen by not only thousands, but you're talking about potentially millions and millions of people that are going to see these posts that your business is going to get exposure to, even if your business isn't in that general region, right? So
Yep.
me and you were from Canada, right? So let's say we decide to put up a business, whatever. It's not only going to be Canadians that are going to see this business. It could be Americans, it can be South Americans, a broader group, but you know Brazilians, Argentinians, Costa Ricans, and flip that to the other side of the world. You can have that exposure now in Asia, where like just turning the clock back 20 years ago. I know for some people like, oh my god, that's such a long time. Like for me and you, we were kids.
We lived it. We
You
we
know,
somewhat experienced it.
this was unimaginable for you to do advertising. You used to have to run it through your paper, and it always used to be local advertising, unless you were able to afford a commercial.
Yeah,
On
exactly.
international audience television. Now you're talking about, hey, I can just get advertising practically for pennies on the dollar on social media, and I know it's going to bring massive exposure to my business. So I think social media in that aspect has done really well for a lot of people, especially during the pandemic and COVID. For restaurants that were maybe going through it and having that exposure to be out there, saying like, okay, they're on Uber, they're on Skip, they're on whatever delivery service at that time. Like, I think it was amazing in that regards to keep small businesses going. And not only that, but if you're somebody starting a company too, just right away to just put yourself out there and expose yourself to millions of people. I think that's something that honestly I applauded for, and something that I think has aided a lot of people in that regard.
Definitely. And there's other positive aspects too. I mean, just the fact that you're connected to so many different people on a global network, it gives you access to a bunch of cultures that you might not have known, a bunch of perspectives in the world that you might not have thought about. So it does provide a lot of information, and I think also it facilitates a lot the exchange of information um, that we have going around, which previously, again, like dial it back 20 years, you didn't have that level of exchanging of information that you have today. And we can see it affecting everything, right? We can see it from affecting all the way from, your local, like you said, for your local business. your local small restaurant that needs to garner its first couple of clients to start up, to affecting entire markets like the stock market in New York, right? So, like we saw, especially in COVID with GameStop, for example, all of that had to do with people getting on the internet, being social, exchanging ideas that otherwise would not have been there. So,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. I know I might be
Game
stretching a bit thin there, but nevertheless,
the GameStop
it's just
situation, totally legal, totally illegal, different
that's a
subject for
different
another day.
conversation.
But yeah,
That's a
I see
different
I see where you're
conversation.
coming from, and
But nevertheless, that idea and that concept came out of Reddit, which is essentially a social media board, right?
yeah.
So it's just a couple of people who had an idea, they shared it, other people jumped on the bandwagon, and you saw how it greatly affected not only GameStop, but also affected a bunch of other players in the market, which we thought shouldn't be affected,
See,
right?
but that's a good thing that you brought up too, though. When you mentioned COVID, 2020.
Yep.
So I think for myself and maybe a lot of people, like when you look back to maybe December 2019, heading into, you know, the doomsday month of March 2020, I think a lot of us there was a lot of articles going around social media about COVID. At that time, it was this disease coming out of China. That's all we knew. That's all anybody else knew. And social media, that was the only thing most people talked about. And they didn't talk about this till I would say probably February, when the news really started to pick up on the momentum of it. Like, oh, this could be bad.
Mhm.
We heard rumblings in late December 2019. There's this virus happening, and then mainstream media kind of got it. But I think more and more, our generation, at least me and you, we don't pay attention to the CNNs and the Foxes of the world. We typically tend to get our information a lot from, Instagram, Facebook, places like that.
Yeah.
Reddit sometimes. I think a lot of us, that's where we kind of look for information first nowadays. I think it's very rare a lot of us turn to places like CBC or CNN or Fox or places like that. So during this time, I remember, at least for myself, I'll speak personally, like I used to get a lot of information about what's happening with COVID through Instagram. And
Yeah.
that's what kind of brought me awareness to the subject and awareness to what's happening. However, though, with every maybe legitimate article that came out about this virus, there was about another 600 that were complete bullshit. So,
Yeah.
we were talking about the good of social media before, but I kind of want to talk about the negatives on that. So,
And I have a big gripe to pick with social media on a lot of aspects,
I know,
and I think
we
you
will
know
get
me
there.
because, well, I have a lot of gripes and a lot of problems with social media, despite kind of somewhat the more positive tone that we started off the conversation. I do have a slightly skewed negative view on the entire thing.
That's why. So I want to get to your point on that, because I know this is something you've been talking about, something you're passionate, like extremely passionate about, is misinformation that's being passed around on social media, and you find that to be one of the biggest negatives of the platforms. Not just one in particular. I know in the news, especially 2016 with the whole election period, and then I know again in 2020 with everything going on. Sorry. That
Yep.
misinformation spread almost like wildfire, right? When people didn't
Yeah.
know, they used to turn to these platforms. It took people maybe seconds to get information to their phone because we were on it consistently, right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah. So how do you feel about news, legitimate and illegitimate news, being posted on Facebook or Instagram without any fact checks? Like, what's your take on that?
So I 100% don't like it. So at the end of the day, here's the thing. So, and to kind of discuss this about, fake news on social media, we do need to touch upon a bit on the history of news media as a whole, right? So we can kind of understand what's happening a bit better. So if we kind of go back in time and we look at the 50s and the 60s, and I know for some of our audience that is ages, centuries ago, but kind of looking back at that, when broadcasting networks were starting off and news networks were starting off, they were seen as somewhat of a public service. eventually, as times passed, we saw the major entertainment companies like Disney, Warner Brothers kind of step in and start buying these new networks. And this is kind of where this idea of media and news being entertainment started to emerge. So these kind of companies came out and started the 24-hour news cycle. They came out and started prioritizing catchy headlines and sensationalized news in order to attract attention, because that's how they made money. More people that looked at the news, the more advertisements they could have. The more advertisements they could have, the more money they could make. Now, what's important to kind of note here is what social media did to this. It kind of blew it completely out of proportion in my mind. Because not only did it kind of follow the same pattern as these major media conglomerates, where it's the most sensationalized and crazy news story is the one that gets the most views and the one that gets the most clicks. But at the same time, it gave the power for absolutely everyone to become a journalist.
So,
And what ends up happening, in my point of view, is when you give the power to everyone to become a journalist, without that person having done adequate research or having the credentials to speak on a subject that they're speaking on, knowing full well that in order to make money on these platforms, in order to get traction and views on these platforms, they need to make sensationalized or absurd statements, that's when you start seeing these crazy news articles come out, these false news articles come out. And that's kind of why you see a lot of misinformation running rampant. Because there's a great saying, the truth is boring. And that's the truth that's behind these social media companies.
okay. So I just want to kind of get just maybe to dial it back to you in a sense, or bring it a little bit more closer. So you're saying that like a lot of social media nowadays, it's derived, or a lot of news outlets nowadays, rather, their main focus is clicks, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about what's in the content of it. They just care about how many clicks get driven to that page.
Yeah.
Right?
For a good chunk, yes. The more sensational the title, the more clicks you'll get.
Okay. So for myself, I want to ask you the question: how do you feel about, maybe different types? Because you're talking about people that maybe don't have credentials, right?
Yep.
Before. So how do you feel about the Alex Jones of the world, where they use platforms like YouTube, which didn't have policies put into place for this type of stuff with misspread of information? And how do you feel about people like that? How do you, how would you prevent that from happening in the future again? Because we know what happened with Alex Jones. That's been covered before by plenty of other people, and anybody can go look that up. And if you don't know who Alex Jones is by now, I recommend Googling him. We're not going to go on here and we're not going to talk about what the stuff he said publicly in media and what his objectives were. I think, plenty of people have covered that already. So I just want to know from your perspective, right? Because you brought this up. What is something that you can do, or something that you feel that can be implemented to stop people like this?
So I can't answer that. So the truth is,
That's
I
good.
can't answer that, right? Because that's the thing with social media. Everybody has a voice, right? And you cannot just randomly come out and say, I'm going to cut your voice just for the sake, because that's the thing with information. The thing, I would kind of like to rephrase your question, because when you kind of said, what would I do to stop this from happening again? One, I don't own a social media platform, right? If I did, maybe I'd have a better answer for you. But I'm not in that industry, and I can't give an answer for how these media platforms should handle a situation like this. What I would like to kind of touch upon is how I would handle this type of information, right? And the way that I handle information on social media is I don't take it for granted the moment I see it. So, for example, if I stumbled upon an Alex Jones podcast or a video where he's saying something about XYZ, well, okay, might be interesting. He's very passionate when he speaks and can be very convincing, which is one of his talents. Fine. But okay, so he said that. Let me go and use social media as a tool of information and see what other people are saying across this platform, right? And starting comparing and contrasting. Do a bit of research if it's something that I really care about and that touches me. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't touch me and I don't really care about, I don't care if Alec Jones speaks about it or someone else speaks about it. I'm just scrolling through social media. But
Okay.
if I care about it and want to learn about it, I'll dig in multiple sources. And I think that's a good practice to have individually when going through social media.
Okay. Okay. No, and that's a good answer, to be honest. Uh, the reason why I wanted to ask you this question is because I don't know if you've paid attention or have seen recently, but Canada is starting to block certain news outlets on Instagram where
Yes.
the Canadian, they've stepped in and said so and so is not a valuable news representative news, so their page is blocked for Canadians. Granted, there's ways around this, right? VPNs, etc., do exist in today's society. The reason why I
Yeah.
want to ask this, and this is not to get on a touchy subject or anything, but we're seeing in the Palestine-Israel conflict right now, and we know that it's very difficult for a lot of journalists to enter into Palestine and Gaza, right? So the news that comes out of those areas, and this is to Instagram's effect, right? And as you were
Yeah.
saying, this is just to show a positive light on it. And I know some people are going to say, well, they're not news credentials, biased news, but that's not the point we're trying to say here. It's people that are on the floor giving reports,
Yeah.
and some of them, if not all of them, are credited for it. And the person I do want to highlight, who's received numerous applause for what he's done, you know, on social media, on Instagram, who's been recognized in Dubai for influential person covering the news, who's taken a risk of leaving that area, and his family behind in order to
Yep.
keep reporting the news in a safer environment. It's Motaz Aziza. I'm mispronouncing that so badly, but he's 20. He's a 24-year-old news journalist out of Palestine and the Gaza Strip, and he's been there covering on the ground and giving perspective from on the ground there, where many places like CNN and many places like Fox haven't been able to do. And this is all made possible because of Instagram. And he's not sharing information as much as he's trying to show what is happening on the ground level there. So I just want to send this out that, I know we talked about negativities, but this is a positivity, I find.
Definitely. Because again, right? Because going back to our original point, social media and the point that we kind of started off on allows you to connect and share opinions and share views and share aspects or ways of thinking that wasn't there, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of what you're bringing up. It's the media, the traditional media that we're looking at has a certain way of reporting on the issue, be it biased or unbiased. I'm not going to touch upon that. That is not what we're here to discuss about today.
Not at all.
But what you just brought up is there's another person which is reporting on the same issue from a different angle, right? And as someone that wants to know what is happening and is being affected by it, but even being away from that situation, I feel that as a personal practice, going back to your question initially, I look at both. I look at both to kind of understand what's happening, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I agree. But kind of a follow up statement to that. For every good journalist, for every good post, and for every good opinion that's out there on social media that gives you a new outlook on a situation, how many are counterbalanced by false news, extreme points of view that are not based on anything, extreme points of view that are generally more divisive and are pushing people to extremes rather than simply just sharing information?
Exactly. And there's a lot more of that than I think there is of somebody who's actually posting the truth.
Exactly.
Because my opinion's always been that is people are going to take the truth and spin it in whatever direction they want to create whatever headline they want. And this is just to go back to your previous point with the whole clicks, right? They might take an ounce of truth, right? And like we saw, what was spreading around December 2019? Oh, it's this virus out in China. Okay. What was happening in 2019 at that time? Well, there was a presidential election happening, and there was this, you know, patriotism, I would say, that followed that, right?
Hmm.
So what do we
Yeah.
do? Well, there's this disease out in China. We're trying to maneuver, you know, products or manufacturing out of China to make it into America, right? So
Yeah.
what do we do? Well, look what's happening there. You know, like why? Let's bring our manufacturing back here because they're closed. So news
Yeah.
articles would spin the like that to put their own stories onto it, where may or may not be true, right?
So and I agree, and it goes back to exactly what we said: sensational titles, sensational headlines get more clicks than the truth.
Yeah.
But this is where my gripe with social media comes in. It's not only the fake news that exists, which is overwhelming. It overwhelms even the good news that's in social media. But it's also how people's behavior changes when on social media. And it's interesting to see, right? It's very interesting to see what people are willing to say and what positions people are willing to take on social media as opposed to reality. And when they're out in real life, that's what I mean by reality. Like out and about in like walking around in stores or in downtown of any major city. And
So you mean like if I'm going out to go get,
exactly,
my
exactly. If you're going out to
groceries?
get your groceries or something like that, as opposed to the position you'll have on, say, a social media aspect behind a screen.
So
And it kind of leads into two things here, right? The sensational kind of posts and media articles, they give an incentive to people who want to profit off of social media, right? To have sensational outlooks, to have extreme opinions on positions. That's how we get these Alec Joneses, so to speak, right? I'm by no means that saying Alex Jones is a media genius, right? But he does know the more extreme his video, the more extreme his post, the more people are going to share it, the more people are going to laugh about it, the more people are going to comment. And
so,
that's going to get picked up by the algorithm,
so let me ask
right?
you a question, because you did bring this up about people maybe not totally portraying who they really are on social media and fabricating a
Hmm.
lifestyle. I think that's what you were trying to allude to
Yeah.
for a bit. So this goes without saying. I think you're right. I don't think you're right. I know you're right. A lot of people, what they'll do, or a lot of people, what we see do is, you always tend to post the positive side of your life. Nobody posts that negative side. Nobody
Yep.
wants, like, coming from myself, and also, nobody wants to see the bad side, right? You go on social media to escape. You don't go on social media to think about your day,
Yeah.
right? So, if I'm on there, right, I'd rather see somebody living up their lifestyle. Like, cool, this person's on a beach in Cancun, or this person's taking a cruise around the Mediterranean. Like, awesome, because I'm escaping reality. If I'm going on social media to see people post about their actual days, like, today was a hard day doing 9 to 5.
Hmm.
Like, I know it's a hard day. I just did a 9 to 5. I'm beat up from a 9 to 5. The last thing I want to do is to hop onto this platform where I usually use it to escape. I had a rough day. I don't want to think about it. I'll go on social media, try to look up funny memes about cats
Yeah.
or dogs or whatever, to escape what's going on in my real life. The last thing I want to see is real life, you know?
Yeah.
So it kind of brought to your point where people, like you were saying, they're, you use the word sensational content, you know?
Yeah.
I see it as more of like an extremist, not
Yes.
extremist, but kind of like taking your
Yes.
lifestyle and putting it to the extreme 100% happiness. Nobody lives like that in real life. You know, if we all live the way we wanted to live on social media, we all go broke in a year. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or how you live.
Yeah.
I think you could be the most richest person in the world, but if you want to live every day flying a private jet across the world, you're eventually going to run out of those funds. So,
Yeah.
I- and this goes back to another situation, right? If you're somebody who's always beat up in life, right? And all you're doing is seeing this type of stuff on Instagram or on Facebook or on any other platform you go, like, look at this person, they're always on vacation. Look at this person, they're always on vacation. Look at this person, they're always on vacation. They're on a beach. This person's on a beach. I never see them work. But here I am shoveling out, let's say 40 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
Just to get by in life. Like,
Yeah.
You find it a little bit disheartening to see this, and not only see it from one person, but to see it from like probably hundreds of people. And you ask yourself, well, why can't that be me? And when you see it every day and you ask yourself every day, why can't that be me? It weighs on you. So
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you the question. I know I feel like I maybe took a while to get here to this point. What I'm trying to make is, do you feel like social media has impacted a lot of people's mental health in a negative way?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. And and you brought it up. You actually brought it up. That's kind of one of the main, I wouldn't say the main reason, but one reason connected to depression on social media, right? Or feelings of inadequacy. Um, and again, going back to the sensational content, what ends up happening? Someone posts about a private jet and a gold Rolex and a bunch of women around them, right? If it's for men, right? What ends up happening? A lot of men start liking it. A lot of men start commenting on it. Social media picks it up and starts spreading it all over the platform. So the thing is, the social media algorithm skews it heavily into one type of content. And that's the type of content that then influences every other type of content that comes out of it. If you have one video that goes super viral of someone flashing their extremely wealthy lifestyle, then you best believe there's going to be a million copies of that coming out because everyone's trying to grab a piece of that virality. Then what happens is ultimately the end user, right, which is not the content creator, but the person just consuming it, he's seeing or she is seeing this extravagant lifestyle that is by no means reality. It's a fiction of imagination. It's a video, right? It's a setting. It's a set. It's like making a movie. It's the same thing. But they cannot distill the difference because in people's minds, social media, especially when it was built initially, was made for people to exchange real aspects of their life, where they're going to eat, photos of where they visited. Hey, I'm going to visit this new play. What do you guys think? So it had a real aspect to it. But now when we're looking at, extreme content like this, people can still not make the distinction of whether or not this is fake or this is real. And because they can't make that distinction, and because social media and the algorithms behind these platforms skew the videos around and skew the information around the most extreme content that gets the most of clicks, people get a false sense of reality. By getting a false sense of reality, and I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but ultimately leads people to come to a wrong conclusion about whether their life is good or whether their life is bad.
See, but
And that leads to dissatisfaction, which can lead to feeling inferior, which can lead to depression.
and you brought up a good point with the whole, social media was originally created for people to share their real life, right?
Yeah.
And you see that now when new social media has come out, right? It's always going back to, it's like, show who you really are. Look at
Yeah.
Be Real. I don't know if you know what that really is
No.
on your end, but Be Real is every whatever. There's a timer that allows you to post.
Yeah.
So at this specific time, you have to post a photo of where you're at. So if what you see and what's behind you. So it's like Be Real. So the more truthful social media.
Yeah.
So like you were elaborating too, I think everybody's chasing that. We want to be real on social media, but yet we always follow the unreal, and that's kind
Yeah,
of it.
because here's the thing, we know that's what's going to get the clicks.
No, but it's not only.
We know that listen, if I take a photo of me eating a sandwich, that's not going to get clicks. But if I take a photo eating caviar on a private jet, I'm going to get thousands of clicks.
Yeah.
So then that plays into my ego, my fame,
It's good. Yeah,
I want to be
exactly.
famous,
It's
right?
gonna play. It's gonna play into your ego and your fame. But I'm trying to say is from a perspective of the person that's consuming the content,
Right.
right? Why do we want to
But
follow this if we know
well,
it's going to
that's
do us harm? So my
but that's
opinion
the
on
thing.
that is a little different than I think maybe your opinion on that is. Like I said, is we want to imagine this is what our lifestyle is. We want to imagine this is what we can obtain and what we can achieve. And granted, maybe that's not everybody,
Right.
but it's my perspective on things. So when I
So
follow somebody,
essentially,
so when I follow
it's
some,
living vicariously through the other person.
yeah, granted,
Okay.
when I was younger, that would be the plan, right? I think when we
Yeah.
were younger, we were growing up and we were in finance. I think a lot of people always wanted to be like, oh, I'm going to go into the stock markets. I want to be like the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
But what people forget is that no, you probably don't. And it's nice when you see it portrayed and all that, and it looks amazing. But keep in mind, he's also failed. He's also done a lot of jail time. He's lost friends
Yeah.
that he's called close. He's lost
Yep.
family. He's probably waking up in an empty house. Granted, maybe not alone, but you know, you
Yeah.
see the good of what that story told,
Yeah.
but you don't see the negative of what that story told.
Yeah, because the
For
negative isn't fun.
exactly for every one Jordan Belfort, there's probably millions of failed. And that failure isn't just bad, it's sometimes the worst case.
Yeah, and granted, Jordan Belfort might not be a beacon of what
Positivity
people
light.
should aspire to
B.
be. But I get what you're saying. It's like for every successful business person that you see on Instagram, right? How many thousands have gone bankrupt
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing?
Keep in mind,
Granted, this can open up another conversation of like, listen, maybe this person found a way to do it right, and maybe you can actually learn what you did wrong and copy, right?
Yeah.
Different perspective. Again, and I think we're both alluding to this, right? Social media has transformed itself into a tool for information, right?
Mhm.
The best way to kind of summarize some of these points. It just depends how you use the tool. Because the tool in itself is flawed, right? It is putting out a vast majority of bad, inaccurate content. But there are grains of truth in there. You just need to be willing to dig through it in order to find it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's something I can speak on, I think, over the course of, I think maybe the last 10 years I've been using social media. And like I said at the beginning, right? When I said, Theo, what does social media mean to you? And you gave your answer and you asked me. And I said, listen, I think over the last couple of years, I've been dialing it back a lot, and over the course of even these last couple of months, it's been dialing it back to the point where, honestly, I think I just follow friends and family. I don't think I follow any celebrities, any, popular figures in the world, other than maybe the occasional pro athlete here and there. But, it's a little different. From following Cristiano Ronaldo, I'm like, yeah, me too. When I was like 10 years old, I wanted to be Cristiano Ronaldo. But I don't follow those people anymore. I think that, I know that lifestyle is superficial almost. It's a lifestyle I don't want to obtain anymore in my life. I'm, older now. And I look at people that, they create social media to create drama, to create, fictional imagination stories. Like, I look on it now and I look when I was, maybe in my late teens, early 20s. And I look at how much times people use social media to create controversy, create drama. And now that I'm older, I realize how stupid that is. Like, we don't need that in our lives.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Goes back around to, the clicks, goes back around to the viewership. And I think what's interesting here, one of the questions that we might end up asking ourselves is, why do we yearn so much about the viewership, the clicks, the answers, the comments, right? And there's actually an interesting thing here with social media. It's an actual scientific fact, is that using social media, it actually wires your brain to release dopamine. It actually is able to essentially instigate the reward effect of your brain. And dopamine, for maybe the audience that might not know, is essentially a chemical that your brain releases, which is also released during periods where the body feels a lot of pleasure. So sex, happiness,
Sex.
excitement, stuff
Let's
like
talk
that.
about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
I had a feeling you were gonna do that.
I'm
That's
always
why
gonna do that.
I was very careful with the word. I knew
He's
you
salt
were
and
gonna
pepper. Salt and pepper every day of the week, man.
I knew you were gonna do that. But that's essentially why we yearn for this virality, why we want to go viral, why we want clicks, why we want comments, is because whenever we get that notification on our phone that we got a like, that we got a comment on our post, that we got a share, that releases dopamine. That affects us and makes our brain release dopamine. And dopamine is addicting. It's very addicting to the human body because it's related to pleasure, it's related to happiness, right? And that's one of the psychological aspects that pushes people to start drama, like you said, start controversy, take extreme positions to get that extra click, to get that extra view.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right on that sentence. You know, like you're saying, I'm pretty sure like people have probably seen it everywhere. It's when you're going through a rough time, you want those clicks.
Yeah.
You want that engagement, and you're gonna post and talk to people more and more. I forgot who said it, but I'm pretty sure this maybe a while back. It's like, social media is fantastic when you're going through hard times. In the sense that, like you mentioned, dopamine effect, right?
Mhm.
You're going through a hard time. You want your phone to be buzzing every single day because human interaction
Yeah.
is something you need. And for most people, I think for a lot of people, we tend to be to ourselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you on that sentence. So just to kind of wrap up what we talked about today.
Yeah.
Right. So social media has goods and bads. I think that's pretty clear. I have an awful singing voice. That's
Definitely. That's 100%
that's
the case.
100% the case. I promise I won't do it again, but
No, you're not gonna promise. You're gonna
promises
definitely do
tend
it
to be
again.
broken by me, apparently. So
You're definitely gonna do it again.
100% I'm gonna do it again. So I just want to get your final opinion on it. So what are your takes? Like, what are your takeaways from this conversation? What do you feel, social media is now? Like, I know, like as you said, this is coming from perspective of somebody who doesn't use social media.
Yeah.
After this conversation, do you still feel the negativity around it? Do you see some positives to it?
Social media should be permanently banned. No, I'm
Set
kidding.
it to the fire.
Just tear it all down. Cancel everything. No. I mean, I think my stance stays the same, right? In all honesty, the way, again, as I approach this conversation, is my initial take on social media is that really it's just a tool. It's another communication tool and another tool to kind of filter information and to see new perspectives or find new bits of information that might interest you. And that's what it still remains to me, because in my view, it's doing currently, the way the algorithms are set up and the way it's currently being used by society, it's creating more harm and more negatives than the positives that it also brings to the table. So, from my perspective, it's a tool, and it's a tool that quite often I like to stay away from, except when I need to communicate with my very close friends and family. And other than that, I shut it down and I walk away from. I don't know what your take is from this conversation.
Well, like I said, beginning, right? I think from someone who younger me would have been like, yeah, social media is great. Like, look at all the people I'm following. Look at all the engagement I'm getting. What's up, peeps?
Yeah.
Stuff. When you're young and you're in your 20s, like it's cool. You're getting that engagement, and I know we haven't even touched on dating apps, which is another form of social media altogether, but it
Yeah.
comes back to your dopamine thing, right?
Yeah.
When you're younger, right? You're on Tinder, you're on Hinge, you're on whatever, Bumble, and getting those likes feel good. And
Exactly.
now that you get older, you're like, man, I want something real. I don't want that fake crap. And
Yeah.
you get there.
I'm going bankrupt. I really don't care about the likes on Tinder.
I know you don't, but I'm just saying, like, as you get older, you care less about that type of stuff, right?
Yeah,
You want to
exactly. Exactly.
you want to find that real connection, and kind of alluding, like I said, as I got older, I care less and less about those likes. I care
Yeah.
less and less about using those platforms and wanting to be in the real world, right? So I think we kind of flipped our initial opinions. I think maybe you saw a little bit more of the positives. I've seen a lot more of the negatives. But just kind of relaying it back to the audience, what do you guys think? Like, how do you guys use social media? How do you guys feel about social media? Are you an
And I
avid
mean,
user? Are you trying to tell your kids
yeah.
don't use it? I've had bad experiences on it, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people do. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
take long or doesn't take much to go back and look on documentaries about how bad social media has been. There's a great documentary on Netflix, which we're not going to get into this episode, but maybe a later one down the road. In the Tinder Swindler, if I learned English, I'd be able to pronounce that the first time. Where there's a lot of negativity around it, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of like we alluded to in this episode, where there's a lot of fake stuff and fake people out there, which
Yeah.
again, it's a future topic, but just kind of want to know your opinions on this. How do you guys feel about it? Like, is it good? Is it
Exactly.
bad? I don't know. So yeah.
Exactly.
So
And like you said, there's by no means that we could have covered everything there is to say about social media in an hour. And I think this also alludes to a couple of questions that maybe, we could ask our audiences based on the pros and cons that each person will kind of see. Should essentially social media be banned? Should it be more severely regulated? Should there be more regulations about what people post? More control? Should it always be free as it was built to be? Should they have more restrictions? I mean, all very interesting questions that we're very happy to kind of see your opinions on in the comments.
exactly.
And kind of
Should,
get that engagement also going also for us. I think that's going to help us a lot.
exactly. Should Joe, right, audition for America's Got Talent next year? All good
No,
questions with wide
no,
ranges of answers,
no,
man. We don't know
no,
that. We don't know my hidden
no,
talent. I have a voice of an angel.
no, you don't. I'm going to shut you down right
Wow.
away.
Okay,
You
understood.
don't.
Understood.
And
So,
that's coming from someone who sounds like a dying cat whenever he sings. So,
wow.
right.
Okay.
So, no.
So yeah.
But
So
to summarize it all up, we're more than happy to hear your opinions down in the comments. Feel free to comment your opinions freely. And at the same token, we're looking forward to see you on the next episode. Are there any final closing thoughts that you want to share with the audience, Joe?
no, man. Other than my name is Joe, and the man to the right of me is Theo, and
I'm
we just
actually on a screen right now.
you're on a screen, but technically it's on the right side of my screen. So we just want to say thank you for listening to the first episode of Uncut. We hope to see you back for our next episode. Theo,
Yep.
take us out.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you again on our next episode. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and share with anyone that you think this might be helpful to or might find it interesting. And other than that, cheers and have a nice day.
Cha cha.